And we're back with the Dr. Joe Show here in the living room. How did
In
we
the
get
living
here?
room. How did we get and what are the stories that people can tell when they feel comfortable enough in their living room? So John, let me just continue with you for a bit. So did you go and interview these people? How did you find them? Hildy, how were you involved in this? Where did you find them?
Well, Bonnie and I worked together.
Okay.
So although I conducted the formal interviews, these were all people that Bonnie selected from her personal experience. Here's the thing about Bonnie Addario, who's the named author of the book, but also, as I said, she is after she, I say recovered from her stage 3 lung cancer, in her mind, it wasn't enough that she made it. She wanted everyone suffering from this disease to have the same opportunity that she did. And since 2005, when she was first treated, 2004, 3, when she was late 2003, early 04, when she was first diagnosed, she has dedicated her life to making sure that people who are diagnosed with lung cancer have the best treatment available, know the right questions to ask. So Bonnie had engaged with all the people at different stages. Because we have one wonderful story, one profile in our book of Jim Pantelis, who's a 15-year lung cancer survivor. But what's brilliant about these stories is you would think there would be redundancy. You would think there would be repetition, Dr. Joe, but there isn't.
That's interesting.
And Bonnie knows these people, and you'll see her integrated into each chapter with her thoughts and her feelings and her memories of the people and how they dealt with it. But every story is different. And we learn so much, not just about lung cancer, but humanity and how the good in people. Jim Pantelis, as an example, received his first infusion for lung cancer, his first chemo treatment, as his wife was giving birth to a daughter who was born severely disabled and was going to be a quadriplegic for the rest of her life. Sometimes life piles on. Stella, when we interviewed Jim, all the things he'd been through, Dr. Joe, all he'd achieved by helping others, by becoming an advocate for lung cancer. The thing he was most excited about when we spoke was the fact that they had purchased an eye reading machine for Stella, which would allow he and his wife and their other 2 daughters to communicate with Stella for the first time in the 13 years she'd been alive. All she was going to be able to say was yes and no, or no. But that was a game changer. And Jim also talks about coming back from a chemo treatment during the winter, and his driveway was plowed and his walk was shoveled. Coming back from a radiation treatment in the summer, and his lawn was mowed. And he never knew who did it. But the good in people, but especially the good in this gentleman, this wonderful man who wanted to talk about his daughter and was beaming about this eye reader machine, which was actually developed for ALS patients, that his daughter was now able to say yes and no, which was a game changer. And there are so many stories like that in the book. Another one, because I believe the stories are the best example of how to we have a wonderful profile of a gentleman named Hank Baskett. And Hank Baskett, who is the father of a former NFL football player, Hank Baskett Jr., or the third, he dealt all his career after retiring from the Air Force as a command sergeant major. So a pretty tough guy, right, Dr. Joe? Command sergeant major. He counseled. He was director of an institute or an area, something Hildy might have some knowledge of, that dealt with sexually and physically abused children. He was a counselor. He was in charge, and he dealt with kids who had been bullied. And he took on the ultimate bully in lung cancer. He faced bullies down who would abuse children, sometimes their own children. And then he faces the ultimate bully. But what he said was, and here's the link, he'd tell kids, you got hurt. It's over now. God got it. God got it. God's got it now. You don't have it anymore. God's got it. And that's the same thing he says about his lung cancer. I don't have lung cancer. God took it away. God's got it now. God's in charge. And every one of the people we interviewed has a different story, has a different approach to how they, and Hildy will be able to tell us hers, a different way of a different coping mechanism, whether it be family, faith, friends, what their number one crutch was that allowed them to survive. It's truly like dating myself, but remembering the old black and white detective show from the 60s called The Naked City, starring Paul Burke. And every episode would start with him with a cigarette silhouetted against, some paper mache backdrop of the skyline of Manhattan. And he'd start off by saying, there's 6 million stories in The Naked City. It's one of them. And that's what we learned in writing The Living Room.
Inspirational. Hildy, you want to tell us your story?
Well, I always say, if I can get lung cancer, so can you. I'm healthy, I'm vigorous, I live an active life. I'd like to grab life. So it's just, in some levels, it's kind of a random situation. And so it sounds funny to say I was lucky to find my lung cancer, but it was true. I actually was in the middle of recording a CD, and so I bought a new pair of shoes. I slipped, and that set up this whole random story that's in long form on upstagelungcancer.org, which is our organization that we started. But basically, through a bunch of silly mishaps with doctors and doing the wrong tests and stuff, turned out that I did have 2 tiny tumors, one in my right middle lobe and one in my right lower lobe. And I was very lucky because it was totally found by accident. I just had surgery. It was 1A, had surgery, and that was it. If I hadn't slipped on the shoes, if all the doctors hadn't made some dumb decisions, thank you, doctors, maybe 6 or 7 years later, I would have found it, but at a much more advanced stage. So I said, like, why me? Not like, why did it happen to me, but why did I survive? Why was I lucky enough to do that? And that, for me, that was the impetus to start Upstage Lung Cancer. I at that time, I started around 2008. There really was not that much going on in terms of advocacy or advocacy organizations. So I thought, well, what can I do? And the one thing I know I can do is I can put on a great show. I will stand behind anything I produce is a great show. I guarantee you it's fun, it's well done, great performers, perfect. You don't want to hire me as a secretary or an accountant. Those are things I am horrible at. I make a bazillion mistakes, but I didn't know I could do that. So I started with a good friend of mine, Crispin Weinberg, and Susan Gessner. I got them together and I just said, let's do this. So it's just been an amazing journey, with my organization. And I'd love to tell you more.
Well, please tell me more about Upstage Lung Cancer.
Well, Upstage Lung Cancer, we're a unique organization because we exclusively use music and the performing arts to raise awareness about lung cancer, to try to educate the public and as well as the lung cancer community in a very palatable way. And we also use our performances as a way of raising funds to support innovative early detection lung cancer research. That's the most under kind of under-examined and under-supported area, and it's often the difference between really life and very, very difficult struggles. So I always say it's a little bit like Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar.
Honey.
What?
Sugar. Honey, sugar.
Shepard. Rex.
Spoonful of sugar makes medicine go down.
Right.
Because if you say, hey, let me tell you a little bit about lung cancer, people will say, oh, I got to catch the bus. But next time, I'd love to hear about it, right? But if you say, I have a concert and we've got great performance, we've had tributes to Nat King Cole, Rosemary Clooney, Leonard Bernstein, on and on, like amazing performers, amazing shows. All of those people, by the way, died of lung cancer. And so once there and they hear this great music, we always have a little, little thread, a little story through our concerts, that help people understand, what the story is about lung cancer. And yeah, we're outside of the box, and we've supported some very outside of the box early detection research that I hope will very soon translate into inexpensive, easily accessible methods for detecting lung cancer early. Right now, that's just not present, other than a low-dose CT scan if you have had years of smoking, or and you're over, I've forgotten, they've just dropped the age, but let's say over 60 and you've had many years of smoking, then you can get a low-dose CT scan. But this would be something different, which I could go on forever, but
Well, the fact that it's easily accessible is really so important, so that there are no barriers to care. And what's great is that we also have easily accessible sponsors who have no barriers to supporting us. And so with that, I am so delighted that they are sponsoring this show, because this is a really important topic, really important. Let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
Stretch the canvas, rush with madness. Is it sadness or just a show?